Hi folks, it's Gary here and a warm welcome to the fourth official here on YouTube for this very special kick-off show previewing the upcoming Nations League doubleheader playoff up against Greece. You'll notice that I've got a special guest on with me. Joining me is the distinguished Greek journalist Stephen Kountourou. I think I've maybe got that
That's
correct.
it, yes.
If I've not,
Distinguished. Very
apologies.
nice. Very nice.
Thank you so much for joining us here on the fourth official, Stephen.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited for these two games. And I guess you could also say excited for the next two games we play you guys in the World Cup qualifiers as well. So we'll be seeing a lot of each other this year.
Yes, it's funny how football kind of works that way. That we tend to get that where you can not see a team for a long time, and then all of a sudden it's all of the time. And I think Scotland had that with Israel quite recently, where we seem to
Yes.
be playing Israel about every 3 weeks. And as you mentioned, now we've got Greece now double header in this playoff, and then again in the qualifiers for the upcoming World Cup. And I think it's fair to say that since the highs of winning the Euros 20 years ago, I think Greek international football has probably been in a bit of a lull over the course of the kind of last 10 years. Got players, but not necessarily have had the team. And I think it's maybe been quite similar to Scotland in that way, and that they've been knocking on the door of the big tournaments, but when they've got there, they've kind of fallen quite short in terms of being able to be competitive at the top table. And I think it's probably quite fitting that Scotland and Greece find themselves in this kind of playoff for the Nations League, because I think both nations are probably in a kind of similar state at the moment in terms of where their national team currently are.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. And to kind of steal from the English, it's been over not quite 60 years of hurt, but it's certainly been 11 years of hurt and counting now for Greece. Last tournament we reached was the 2014 World Cup, where we were penalty shootouts away from reaching the quarterfinals, lost out to the surprise package Costa Rica. And ever since then, it's just been over a decade of transition for the Greek national team. We've had talented players individually, but the organization has been generally poor. The Greek Football Federation didn't really prepare the national team for the future, because I think they were kind of comfortable in the present with the players that they had. And then a lot of players retired. Fernando Santos, our manager at the time, went on to manage Portugal, and he then went on to win the Euros with them. And we had a string of managers, including Claudio Ranieri, for people who'll know him, Gus Poyet as well, most recently, before our current manager, Ivan Jovanovic. And it's gone from, like you said, knocking on the door, even banging on the door in the playoff final last year against Georgia, which we got knocked out on penalties. But sometimes it's been the lowest I've ever seen us. I'll always say losing twice to the Faroe Islands in the Euro 2016 qualifiers might be the worst, most embarrassing results I've ever seen a team I support be involved in. Honestly, disgraceful. But we're a long way away from that now, and we're hoping with this new generation of Greek players and some of the older guard too who are still there, maybe Greece can reach the World Cup. That's the ultimate aim, and that's what both the Greek Football Federation and our current manager Ivan Jovanovic has highlighted as the main objective.
And you mentioned there, obviously, some of the managers that have been looking after the Greek side in the last few years. Very few of them actually from Greek football. And obviously, I think that was something that Scotland experimented with as well at times, with like kind of Bertie Vogts, and they've obviously gone back to Steve Clarke of late. And Steve Clarke's gets a very hard time, including from myself, because of his kind of perceived negative style. And I think if you look at the style of this Scotland team, midfield wise, we've got probably one of the most exciting and kind of high caliber midfield areas we've probably ever had, or certainly in recent history, with the likes of Scott McTominay and Billy Gilmore playing in Serie A. You've got John McGinn playing Champions League quarterfinals with Aston Villa. Andy Robertson looking like he's going to win the Premier League this year, and with Liverpool. So lots of big hitters there. But then if you look at our striking options, it's incredibly limited. And I think Steve Clarke will be dying to find a striker from somewhere to try and convert some opportunities. We've seen Tommy Conway called up to the squad of late, and he's in there. And for the first time, Hearts striker James Wilson called up to the squad as well. Very raw, young player, lots of potential, but I don't think he'll be involved certainly from the start in these games, but he takes the place of clubmate Lauren Shankland in the squad. Shankland having dropped out after having a relatively poor season by his standards domestically with Hearts, playing in a bit more withdrawn number 10 role, and the goals have really dried up for him. But James Wilson in the squad, but it's likely that we'll probably see Shea Adams start the game for Steve Clarke's side. In terms of the Greek side, who are the main danger players for us to look out for? Obviously, we'll be aware of some of the kind of big hitters that we'll know that play in the big leagues, but who should we be watching for?
I guess I've got the squad up right now, actually. The main ones to look for is Christos Solis, who's currently having a very good season with Club Brugge. He's come leaps and bounds since the Norwich City transfer, which kind of derailed him for a couple of years. Unfortunately, that Norwich side wasn't very strong anyway, and they went back down. And even some of the Norwich players to this day, fans, I should say, don't understand why he barely played for them. But he rebuilt his career at Düsseldorf in the second Bundesliga, went to Belgium, and he's doing really, really well for Club Brugge now. And just to name a couple more, Vangelis Pavlidis, who's doing very well at Benfica. He's never been able to quite replicate his form for the national team as he has at club level, but that brace against England is one of the best performances I've ever seen from him. Hopefully he can replicate that here, but we'll see. And then there's a couple of really talented young players coming through as well. The big one for the future for us is Konstantinos Garetsas, who the Greek Football Federation and Ivan Jovanovic fought tooth and nail to get him to represent Greece over Belgium for where he was born. But he's born to Greek parents, but born in Belgium, so he could have represented them, and he did at all youth levels as well. So that was a huge coup for us. I don't know how much he'll feature at the moment because he's only 17, but he's predicted to be one of the top players, not just kind of decent potential or anything like that. Belgium fans are shocked that they lost him because of that. That's how highly they rated him as a prospect. So there's a few really good players coming through in Greece, and something we haven't said for a long time is Greece are actually producing good youth players now, and it's a bit of a blend of some Greek Super League players teams starting to give those players opportunities, but also players from abroad like Garetsas, like just having a look at this Christos Zafiris, who's also Norway born, but born in Greece, but lived most of his life in Norway, plays for Slavia Praha. He's another midfielder that's got a lot of potential.
And in terms of the style, the way that Jovanovic plays with Greece, what sort of formation? We know Steve Clarke is a big fan of either a 4-5-1 or a 4-5-4-1, depending on what he decides to do with the centre-back pairings. I think John Souttar's fitness will have a lot to do with that. I think obviously he loves Grant Hanley for whatever reason. But what formation does Greece tend to play in? Do you think they will look to try and match up with Steve Clarke in terms of going with the one up front, whether that is Pavlidis or someone else kind of playing just off him?
So under Jovanovic in particular, Greece has favoured the 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. That's Jovanovic's style. It was his style, at Panathinaikos, where he was a couple of years ago before they let him go. And generally against teams around the same level as us, we try and take the game to them. We're very good defensively. We have great attack. We actually have the opposite problem of Scotland. The weakest part of our team is ironically the midfield, because like I said, we have those talented players coming through, but they're quite young. And then the experienced players in those positions aren't quite at the level of what you'd expect, really, especially compared to Scotland. Scott McTominay being the big one for us is going to be a big danger man for the national team. But it's, he's shored us up defensively. We're much better in transition, much better on the counter-attack, especially against England. That's a key kind of game to see what Greece does against better opposition than us. We soaked up the pressure, hit them on the counter-attack with our pacey wingers and Pavlidis joining in the attack as well. And I think with Scotland it might be a little bit different. I don't think we'll counter quite as much, but I could see elements of that as well. Kind of maybe a combination of the two, trying to maintain possession, but at times with kind of your midfield, I feel like if we don't kind of try to match our defenders with your midfield will get completely overrun. So we need to kind of soak up the pressure from some of your more talented midfield players.
Yeah, we spoke earlier about obviously Andy Robertson being there. His deputy at Liverpool, Kostas Tsimikas, obviously big player for Greece. It'll be interesting to see obviously both of them on the field at the same time. Obviously, won't be in direct competition with them because they'll be on the opposite sides of the field. But he's a player who I think last year was very much seen as the number 2 at Liverpool, but he's seen a lot more minutes this year, I think, as Andy Robertson's form has not quite been at the level he probably in previous seasons, certainly for Liverpool, but domestically, he's still obviously a very big player for Scotland national team, obviously being our captain. There's Kieran Tierney in there as well, who played Champions League for Arsenal last week in the 2-2 draw with PSV as a kind of emergency forward, which is very unlike. Kieran Tierney is obviously coming back to Celtic for next season. But left back is an area of the field that both nations are quite well served in.
Yes, you mentioned Tsimikas. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to him in his club career, because Liverpool seemed set on signing Kerkesh from Bournemouth. And so if Robertson starts to rotate with him and Kerkesh transitions into the number 1 left back, not quite sure what's going to happen to Tsimikas. He signed a new deal last season, and so I do believe that he should leave if he wants to get first-team football, especially for the national team. Because Jovanovic has said he wants players that are playing first-team football and playing consistently. And thankfully under Slot, he has been given a bit more consistency than Klopp. Klopp did intermittently, but when there were certain seasons that got a bit tougher for Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp, he stuck to his kind of starting trusted players much more. And so Robertson saw the game time, and Tsimikas, every other season or so wasn't played as much. And it hasn't impacted him hugely playing for Greece. He's still been able to put in some decent performances, but you can definitely tell that with a lack of game time, it takes him about half an hour to really get into a game, and he looks a bit rusty, but then he'll come alive a bit more. And, with our captain, Tassos Bakasetas, not playing in these 2 fixtures as he's out injured, there's a chance Tsimikas could actually be the captain for Greece. There's a very good chance of that, because he is one of the more senior players in the squad, and he is a leader, and he knows what it means to play for the national team.
In terms of goalkeeping, obviously Scottish fans will remember Vasilis Barkas quite,
Yes.
maybe not fondly. Rangers fans like myself remember him fondly, maybe not quite so appreciated with the green half of Glasgow. But who have Greece gotten goals for them that we can watch for in this upcoming doubleheader?
Well, just a note on Barkas. It's a shame because he's actually a little bit unlucky not to be called up. He's having a really good season with his current club, but there's a big dilemma with Greece for the goalkeepers, because the stalwart starter for the last kind of few years has been Odysseos Vlachodimos, who was very good at Benfica. He went to Nottingham Forest. I kind of expected him to play there. Obviously, Evangelos Marianakis is the owner, both Greek. When he got given an opportunity, he wasn't at his best, and now he's a 3rd string at Newcastle, which, I mean, I think he's like one of the biggest transfers for a goalkeeper, but he's just not played for them. And so with the lack of game time, I guess even with goalkeepers, it will impact you to a certain extent. And he's shown that he's still capable of starting for us, but at times, again, you need game time, even if you're a goalkeeper. And I know you may not exert as much physical energy as an outfield player, but he still needs to keep fresh and keep sharp. And so his deputies, Christos Mandas, is starting to get more opportunities at Lazio. He's not a starter either, but he's at least getting game time, and he's just signed a long-term deal with Lazio. So that shows the intent from their club, from his side, that they see him as a long-term prospect. And Konstantinos Zoulakis at my team, Olympiakos, is the number 1 keeper at the club now, and he's been absolutely sensational. He's one of the big reasons we won the Europa Conference League last season. He's been excellent for us in the Europa League up till recently when we got knocked out by Bodo Glimt. Kept multiple clean sheets. We had the best defense of the league in the Europa League before we faced Bodo Glimt, and in the league, he's been one of the main reasons why we're on our way to hopefully, fingers crossed, winning our first league title for 2 seasons. So I think Vlachodimos will start these next 2 games, but I think in the long term, it's going to be Mandas or Zoulakis who's going to overtake him, because I don't think there's a way he can still be the starter with not playing it, unless he leaves in the summer, that is.
Obviously, we spoke about Greek domestic football a little bit earlier as well. We mentioned Olympiacos being your side. We obviously saw Olympiacos up against Rangers earlier on this season in the Europa League, which was a great result from a Rangers perspective to get a draw over in Greece. Just talk to us a little bit while we've got you on just about how that Bodo Glimt result went down in Greece, because I think from the outside that certainly looked at a little bit of a surprise, although Bodo Glimt obviously have got a bit of European pedigree, but certainly when I saw Olympiacos playing against Rangers earlier on in the season, that they looked as if they were a very decent side. I was delighted to get the point in that one. So slightly surprised maybe that Bodo got the win over Olympiacos, or how's that went down in Greece?
Well, I mean, if you look at the stats, Bodo Glimt going into that game had the most wins of any team in Europe at that point, and there were a lot of extenuating circumstances to what happened in the first leg in particular, because our striker and top scorer of the Europa League at the time, Ayoub El Kabi, was injured. He missed the game. He missed the first leg and the second leg and the games in between in the league and as well. And so that was a big loss. We've had a couple of injuries at the wrong time. And you can say, but you can say there are other circumstances when going to normal, AstroTurf pitch, weather conditions. But end of the day, we did have a strong enough team to maybe get a result, or at least if we lose, not as kind of damaging a loss as we did 3-0 away in Norway. And so that kind of killed the tie for us. Unfortunately, we weren't good. The chances we did create, we just didn't put away, and they put their chances away. It's as simple as that. And then when we took them to Garaskagis in the next leg, we were so much better, so much more clinical. Still missed a couple of chances. We missed a penalty, which was quite taxing as well. And they just caught us on the counter-attack at the end of the first half in the second leg, and their first shot went in. And that's just football, unfortunately. Look, and the positives we can take is that, we won the Conference League last year. We know that our manager, Jose Luis Mendileba, is building the team. Marinakis has showed the intent of the team wanting to be in the Champions League. And with that win, because we're high in the club coefficient as a club, but barring any kind of unlikely circumstances, if we win the league, we're in the Champions League phase next season. And that's ultimately where Marinakis wants us to be. So it's a shame that we didn't get through to the Europa League quarterfinals, because we were more than capable of doing so. And our record in the round of 16 of the Europa League is abysmal. We have lost so many ties in the round of 16 in the last decade or so. It's absolutely ridiculous. But look, we've been very lucky with the amount of trophies we've won in the past, winning a European trophy last season, and our youth side winning the UEFA Youth League in the same season too. So, in our 100-year anniversary, which is this season, and it was only a week ago, we celebrated our 100-year anniversary too. There's not much to. It's disappointing, but we showed ourselves of what we're capable of in the second leg, and hopefully next season we'll be in the Champions League, which will be first time in. It'll be 5 years if we actually make it.
Yep. Okay. Prediction time, Stephen. Scotland doubleheader, Nations League. Putting your Greek hat aside, where do you think the result's going to go?
I think the first leg being in Athens suits Greece, certainly. And I think the game is at Garaskagis, not at the Athens Olympic Stadium, if I'm not mistaken, because it's going, and that makes for a much more kind of enclosed, intense atmosphere. I think with that, I'm taking my Greek hat off as best as possible. I will say that I think that Greece will win the first leg. The second leg will be much tougher. I think it's going to be very close. I don't think it will be a run out for either team. I'll give it to Greece though. I think we'll just edge it.
And in terms of the fact that both teams then play each other in the World Cup qualifiers later on this year as well, that group for the World Cup qualifiers, it's very much going to be a kind of shootout between Greece and Scotland, potentially for the runners-up space in that section. So how much will these two games be important in terms of trying to build up a bit of momentum ahead of those games later on in the year?
I think absolutely, and I personally think, regardless of the results of these two games, the games in the World Cup qualifiers could be very different, because even if one side beats the other one may have sussed the other one out and know kind of how they play. It could be a good psychological edge for one team. It's going to be close for both teams. I think what's going to be crucial for Greece and Scotland is who wins the tie between Portugal and Denmark, because if Denmark win, that gives Greece and Scotland a very, very good chance of even finishing top, because as decent as Denmark are as a team, their generation of players are ebbing out a little bit now. With Portugal, I think it's going to be a second place, because Portugal's team is so talented. They've got so many good individual players. So Denmark being in that group is crucial, and it's more likely than not, because I think if Portugal win, they go to the other group, and then Denmark join our group. So that's going to be huge if we can get Denmark in our group, because then it means I think it could be a three-way kind of run to the top spot.
Yep, and obviously Belarus in there as well, who can't be slept upon.
No, definitely not.
And true Scotland style, they could quite easily get a win against Denmark and then lose in Belarus, which would be very typical of what we've seen over the course of the last kind of 30 years. But yeah, long while to go before we get to those fixtures, but certainly one good thing from a Scottish perspective, the games are going to be live on the BBC due to a deal that's been done, rather than having to watch it on a dodgy YouTube feed, which we've had to do for our more recent European fixtures within Nations League.
So feelings mutual.
Games live on the BBC will certainly help. Probably get a bigger audience, but the game Hampden sold out as well, and I think it is, depending on obviously what happens over in Athens, how live the tie is when it gets back to Hampden next weekend remains to be seen. Big thank you to Stephen for joining us on this preview. If anyone wants to hear more from you, Stephen, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me on my handle, which I think, is that going to be shown? That.
Yeah, it's right there.
And make sure you spell it correctly as well, because the surname is long. And also, what I write for and host a podcast for Hellas Football at Hellas Footy on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Our podcast is on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on any podcast platform you listen to us on. We talk weekly about everything Greek football, the Greek Super League, Greek players playing abroad, Greek national team, Greek teams in Europe, although there are no Greek teams in Europe now, so until next season. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And if for anyone who's interested in listening about Greek football.
Fantastic. Real insight into Greek football this morning from Stephen. It's been a pleasure having you on, mate, and hope you enjoy the couple of games coming up. Maybe not too much, but I hope you enjoy the matches. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.